So, I want you to imagine something for a second. You wake up one morning, you feel a little off, you look down, and you've turned into a giant bug. That's not a nightmare. That's the opening line of Franz Kafka's masterpiece, The Metamorphosis. Today we're going to crawl through Gregor Samsa's bizarre new life and see what this strange story tells us about family, money, and what we're actually worth to each other.
Right, so let's start with that absolutely legendary opening. There's no build-up, no weird dream sequence, no scientific explanation. Just bam! 1 second Gregor Samsa is a person, the next he's an insect. And just like that, Kafka yanks us into this completely absurd world.
So, Section 1. A man becomes an insect. Now, how do you even begin to process something like that? Well, let's look at what happens right after the big reveal. Because what it shows us about Gregor's life is, well, it's surprisingly normal, and that's what makes it so terrifying.
And this is where it gets really strange. You'd think he'd be screaming, right? Having a total meltdown? Nope. Gregor's body is a complete nightmare, but his mind is stuck on one thing. He's going to be late for work. He's worried about catching the train, about what his boss will say. That little detail tells you everything you need to know about the life he was living before he became a bug.
So why the obsession with work? Well, here's why. Gregor wasn't just a guy with a job, he was the provider. The only provider. His entire sense of self, his whole purpose in life, was tied up in being the one who paid the bills and took care of his family. He was, for all intents and purposes, their engine.
And with this transformation, that engine just dies. He can't work, he can't talk, he can't even leave his room. In an instant, his entire function is just gone. He's no longer the provider. He's just this thing locked in a room, a source of absolute terror for the very people he supported.
Okay, so let's move on to how this whole situation becomes a family crisis. Because this is where the story shifts from being about Gregor's personal horror to something much, much darker. We're gonna watch a family's love slowly curdle into something else entirely.
You can literally watch their feelings decay over time. At first, there's shock, but his sister Greta at least tries to care for him. But then, a funny thing happens. The family starts to stand on their own 2 feet. They get jobs, and as they become more independent, Gregor transforms from their beloved son into an embarrassing secret, a burden. That resentment just builds and builds until it explodes into actual violence. His own dad throws an apple at him so hard it gets stuck in his back. That apple is so much more than a piece of fruit, it's a symbol of their complete rejection.
And even Great, who was his one and only ally in all this, she breaks too. The daily task of caring for him just wears her down until she can't take it anymore. She stops seeing her brother and starts seeing only this disgusting creature that's ruined her life.
So all of this leads us to the story's absolutely devastating climax. Gregor makes one last, desperate attempt to connect, to show them that there's still a person inside that shell, and it backfires. Horribly.
Picture this. One night, Greta is playing her violin, and the music is so beautiful it touches something deep inside Gregor. He feels something human, so he crawls out of his room, drawn to that sound, to that one moment of beauty in his miserable existence. But they don't see a soul responding to art. They see a giant bug crawling into the living room and scaring their tenants. This one deeply human gesture is met with pure disgust and horror. And in that moment of total misunderstanding, his fate is sealed. It's game over.
And who delivers the final blow? His own sister. Greet stands up and says, "We have to get rid of it." She argues that the real Gregor would have left them long ago out of love. She completely erases his identity, calling him an it. She decides for everyone that he is no longer human.
And Gregor hears this, and he just accepts it. He realizes that the only gift he can give his family now is his own death. So he crawls back to his room, wounded, starving, and with a completely broken heart. And he just lets go. So the next morning, when they find his body, do they cry? Do they feel guilty? Nope, not at all. They feel relief. A huge weight has been lifted, and they immediately start making plans for their bright, new, Gregor-free future. It's absolutely chilling.
So, after all that, what are we supposed to take away from this? I mean, it's a pretty bleak story. But the reason the Metamorphosis is still talked about today is because it's about so much more than a guy who turns into an insect. It's really holding up a mirror to some dark parts of our own world.
When you boil it down, this story hits on some really uncomfortable truths, doesn't it? Think about it. When Gregor was useful, when he was bringing home the paycheck, he was loved. He was valued. The second he became a burden, that love just vanished. Kafka is basically asking, in a world that's so obsessed with what you can do, what you can produce, is our worth as people completely conditional?
You know, what makes this all so creepy is the way Kafka tells the story. He's not overly dramatic. He describes all these horrible events in this very calm, matter-of-fact way. The real horror isn't some evil monster. It's how logically and calmly this ordinary family just disposes of one of their own. It's about the kind of cruelty that could happen in plain sight.
And that really brings us to the final, haunting question that the story leaves us with. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask how we measure a person's value in our friends, our family, and even in ourselves. It's a question that was unsettling 100 years ago, and you know what? It's just as unsettling today.